I'm Mike Hanawald, field agronomist with Beck's Hybrids, and standing here in a wheat field, and wheat harvest is approaching. With the dry weather that we've been experiencing lately, the wheat has been moving along very quickly. You can see that we've just got a tinge of yellow to this wheat crop and up here in northern Ohio, but especially as you go south and over the next few weeks, the wheat's going to turn pretty rapidly. So as we approach wheat harvest, just something to think about when it comes to getting that combine set and getting ready to go. Make sure that you double check your combine settings for wheat harvest this year, and the reason for that is that unfortunately, due to the dry weather, we're probably going to be seeing some smaller than normal kernel sizes, and so your typical combine settings might need to be tweaked. You know, when we're dealing with a small seeded crop like wheat, it's pretty easy to let some kernels slip out the back, and it doesn't take very many of those kernels to add up to bushels that we're leaving on the ground. And so just double check those settings and make sure you're keeping every kernel in the tank. Now, the next thing after wheat harvest is we think about double crop soybeans. And for those of us in northern Ohio, double crops aren't as common of occurrence, whereas southern Ohio, it's an every year opportunity to gain some additional revenue on your acres. And so first consideration to think about with your double crops is planting population. Now, we talk about in soybeans that a lower planting population can often be ideal for early planted beans, but we're at the other end of the spectrum when it comes to double crops with late planted beans. And so we're looking at populations of 200,000 or more to really obtain maximum yields with these double crop beans. And the reason for that is that double crops have so little time to be able to fill out those pods, and they're just not getting as much height to them and don't put on as many nodes. And so by putting more plants out there, we get more nodes that way by increasing our plant count and making up for that shorter season that we're giving these beans to be able to grow and produce. We've got 4 years of PFR data, as you can see on the screen, that backs up those high populations. That extra investment of seed is a worthwhile investment to maximize your yields. Another important consideration for double crop beans is planting depth. So standing here in a bean field of first crop beans planted on May 16th, and you can see we've got a good stand here. But the reason why planting depth is so important for both your first crop beans and double crop beans is not only getting the beans out of the ground and establishing a good root system, but also your nodule development. So in PFR, we've got 3 years of testing that shows that the optimum planting depth in soybeans is 1.5 inches. And if we take a look at these that we had planted right here, you can see that we were right about that 1.5 inches. So where that curve is in the root of the soybean is where that planting depth is. But the other thing you notice, and this is pretty impressive for a V1 soybean with only one full trifoliate, is that we've already got some pretty good nodule development happening here. But notice that the bulk of that nodule development is happening at planting depth. So planting that beans just a touch deeper puts those nodules just a little bit deeper. And we know that nodules, the optimum performance when they're most efficient in producing nitrogen is between 68 and 74 degrees Fahrenheit, a lot like what you'd set the thermostat in your house at. And so by keeping those nodules just a little bit deeper, it gives just a little bit more insulation of soil above those nodules on the hot summer days that these beans are going to have, to keep them just a little bit cooler and more efficient, and hopefully then more productive to increase our yield. Another consideration with double crop beans, I find this kind of interesting, is how you set your row cleaners. And so when we look at first crop beans and you look at row cleaners moving away last year's residue, we've seen a yield gain in PFR by doing that in both planting corn and planting beans, running a row cleaner. However, our biggest yield gain that we've seen in our PFR testing is actually with double crop beans. And you think about it, first crop beans were moving last year's residue, whereas double crops, we're moving fresh residue that's right behind the combine from that wheat stubble and that wheat crop. And so we've seen about a 2 bushel gain by doing that, and helping to just get that clear and get that bean up out of the ground and help it to take off and get going as fast as possible is really important for making the most of our double crops. If you have any questions about these or any agronomic topics, feel free to reach out to your local Beck's representative, and we'd be happy to help.